Hello again, hi and welcome back. This is your video for week number 5 of the Flex course, and we're continuing under the same format that we've kind of been working with up until now. We've got an essential rudiment and an essential groove with variations to kind of go through this week. So let's take a look here at the overview. And we'll just run down what we're going to cover. There it is, week 5. And because it's week 5, it seemed only fitting that we look at the 5-stroke roll for week 5. That's our essential rudiment. There you see the sticking combination, right, right, left, left, right, and left, left, right, right, left. This is a rudiment that goes back and forth between the lead hand, similar to how the paradiddle works. Right, right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left. Here we have right, right, left, left, right, left, left, right, right, left. So it's always flipping back and forth. So we're going to play that using 16th notes. We're going to practice it with the bass drum and the hi-hat foot going underneath. We're going to integrate some toms and build patterns that way around the drum set, moving those 5-stroke rolls all around the kit. And you can play them on the cymbals and things too. So we can experiment that way and see what kind of interesting sounds we can get and how we can apply the 5-stroke roll within a groove setting or as a fill. It's a very useful rudiment. It comes in handy in a lot of different situations to make some interesting, cool sounds. And then we're going to play the essential groove as an 8th note hi-hat groove. And we're going to start including 16th notes on the bass drum. So we'll talk about that when we get to the groove section. First of all, let's just jump right in and get looking at the 5-stroke roll rudiment. So the 5-stroke roll is actually part of a group of rudiments that are basically known as your long rolls. And they start with the 5-stroke roll and then they gradually increase. You get a 5-stroke roll, a 7-stroke roll, a 9-stroke roll, an 11-stroke roll, etc. So you're adding 2 strokes each time. And these are known as the long rolls. And they're called open rolls. And that terminology just means that when you're playing the double stroke portion of the roll, you're playing those double strokes in an open fashion like this. Da, 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 da. So there's clear sound of each stroke. The difference between an open stroke roll like this and a closed stroke roll, a closed roll has more of a close, tight buzzing sound like this. So with the open roll, you get that wider, spaced out sound between the strokes. That's an open double stroke roll. And the long rolls, in this case, the way we're going to learn them are going to have that open roll sound. And we're starting with the 5-stroke roll, which is the shortest one. Then you can graduate through and play the longer double stroke open rolls. Let's get this up so we can talk about it together. So here it is. So just to begin, we can start that 5-stroke roll off very slow, playing it as 8th notes. Usually when we're going to play a 5-stroke roll in a practical application, we would use 16th notes. For example, if I was playing a beat and I wanted to use a 5-stroke roll as a fill, I might do this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and that's a 5-stroke roll. So you throw it in that way and it's fast. Usually these are a little bit faster when you get the facility into your hands To play those double strokes, the 5-stroke roll is usually a little bit faster. But how we get there is to start slow with these eighth notes and pay close attention to how it's counted, because we have a rest here at the end of each measure. So that means we're going to go 1 and 2 and 3, rest. 1 and 2 and 3, rest. That's the official way to count it, which you see down here, counting your quarter notes and eighth notes beats as you count this rudiment out. You can also count it as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, rest. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's your 5 strokes that make up the 5-stroke roll. So let's start nice and slow and easy. I'm going to demonstrate the 5-stroke roll using those eighth notes. So this is a slower application. 4, 1 and 2 and 3. 1 and 2 and 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3. So what I'm doing is playing 2 sets of double strokes, right, right, left, left, right, rest, left, left, right, right, left. And I'm kind of doing a ever so slightly an accent on that final single stroke of each side. So how I do that is I go right, right, left, left. My right hand starts to come up there. Right, right, left, left, right. Left, left, right, right, left. 1 and 2 and 3, 4. 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 So that's the basic first way to play it. Nice and slow so you can control those double strokes. Try to keep them all even. Try to bring out the single stroke at the end just ever so slightly louder, just so you can get comfortable with closing off that 5-stroke roll nice and strong. You don't want it to sound muddy like this. You want to finish those rolls off nice and strong. That makes it sound clean. Okay, so that's the first basic 5-stroke roll. Let's add the bass drum. And the bass drum, as we've done in most of our other rudiments so far, the bass drum will play in a quarter note pulse. Actually, no, it's not. Let me just correct myself, and I'll show you. Look at this. The bass drum plays here on 1 and on 3. So it's only playing on 2 of the 4 beats. So this is what it'll sound like. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 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 3, 4. So your 5-stroke roll begins with a bass drum and it ends with a bass drum. That's a good way of remembering it. You play the bass drum on the very first hit, and you play the bass drum on the very last hit. So we're going to do that again. 1 and 2 and 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 4. Right, right, left, left, right. Left, left, right, right, left. So that's the 5-stroke roll with the bass drum added in. Give each of these versions a good long practice. You want to get this comfortable in your hands. The fact that it flops back and forth every time. Each time you're starting with the opposite hand. So you got to take some time to get that comfortable. Get used to that. Now we're going to move on and play the 5-stroke roll using 16th notes. So, if we base that off of the speed that we played the 8th notes, we would go like this. 1 and 2 and 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3. So we go 1 and 2, 3 and 4. 1 and 2, 3 and 4. Okay, so I'm playing the bass drum in there, but we don't need to yet. We're not at that stage yet. Let's play the 16th notes without the bass. 1 and 2, 3 and 4. 1 and 2, 3 and 4. Right, left, right. So let's try going back and forth between the 8th notes and the 16th notes. 1 and 2 and 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 4. 1 and 2, 3 and 4. 1 and 2, 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3, 4. 1 and 2, 3 and 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 4. 1 and 2, 3 1 and 2 and 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2, 3 and 4. Let's try that same thing with the bass drum. I'm going to play 8th notes to 16th notes with the bass drum holding down a steady quarter note rhythm. 1 and 2 and 3, 4. 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 1 and 2, 3 and 4. 1 and 2, 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3, 4. So that's how that sounds when you play the bass drum on every quarter note, along with the 8th notes and the 16th notes. So next step here, I'm going to share the screen so that we can look at this, because there's a few things in the notation that are important to really pay close attention to. We're going to start now adding the toms in. So here it says adding toms, and look closely here. So we remember what all of these lines mean. This is your snare. Da, 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 da. This is your bass drum. So check along the bottom. Bass on 1, bass on 2, bass on 3, bass on 4. And there it is. And it's the same all the way through. Snare is playing these 4 16th notes. Right, right, left, left. Right. This stroke is down here on the hand. This is your bass drum. This is your floor tom. In case you don't remember that from the previous few weeks, this line is your floor tom, which is a good drum to use for your right hand because it's on that side of the drum set. If you're left-handed, then it would be the other way around. But it's right there. So 1 and 2, there it is, coming over to the floor tom. Then we have the second half of the 5-stroke roll. Left, left, right, right, back on the snare. Left. Up here on this top space. Top space is the first tom, the high tom. So what we've got is a 5-stroke roll that brings in a tom on each of those single strokes. Okay, so let's play that with the bass drum. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2, 3 and 4. 1 and 2, 3 and 4. And there it is with the toms in there going back and forth. Da 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 low, da 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 high. And that's a nice little kind of thing to get comfortable with because it helps you really get used to moving to different spaces on the kit with the hand that it makes sense to use. Right hand over to right side, left hand up here on the left side. And another thing that gets overlooked a lot with starting out drumming, your left hand is usually your weaker hand. If you're right-handed, your left hand is a bit slower, it's not as strong. So when we move around the drums, we're almost always starting the movements going around the drums with the strong hand, with the right one. This pattern's cool because it forces you to get that left hand to come up here, which normally you would do patterns where you'd come off the snare and your right hand would do it first. This way the left hand gets a chance to always get that motion going. And that helps this weaker hand to kind of catch up a little bit, get in the action and get moving into places where it might not normally move. So the 5-stroke roll is really good for that. So that's the first kind of variation of adding a tom. And now we can look at the second one. Let's check out what we've got here. We're gonna take the concept that we just did and in a way sort of flip it. Here we kept these double strokes on the snare and we played the single stroke each on a different tom. Now we're going to flip it and we're going to play the double strokes each on a tom and it come back to the snare here on the single strokes. Okay? So floor tom, high tom, snare. And then it's reversed. High tom, floor tom, snare. So this variation will sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 E and a 2 and 3 E and a 4. 1 E and a 2 and 3 E and a 4. So the good thing about these 5-stroke rolls, and a lot of the rudiments that we're getting into, paradiddles as well, but these 5-stroke rolls, you can make nice little sound combinations with minimal effort because you're playing those double strokes. It's quite easy. It's not very cumbersome or complicated to just play that little melody. So you get a lot of sound with not a whole lot of effort. It's quite efficient. And if we play it a bit faster, you can get an idea for just how kind of cool it could sound. So I was mixing up those two different versions there, in and out. Sometimes I was playing the double stroke section on the snare. Sometimes I was using the toms for the double stroke section. And you get these different kind of moving melodies and sounds that start to emerge when you change up the pattern. So that's the 5-stroke roll played in that particular way. Da 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 da. You can also play it you can break that 5-stroke roll up between your two cymbals here, a ride cymbal on your right hand side and a hi-hat cymbal on your left hand side. Right, left, right, and left, right, left. Now you could turn that into a groove. Cymbals. And that all of that is practicing that back and forth movement. Right, left, right, left, right, left. And that gets really, really useful. The more you get your sticks bouncing and you get comfortable and you can build up speed, you can play 5-stroke rolls all around the drums and they start to sound really smooth and interesting. So one last line here on the page. This is the challenge to add that hi-hat foot. The hi-hat foot's going to go on 2 and on 4. You see that here. So we have 1 is a bass drum, 2 is a hi-hat. 1 is a bass drum, 2 is a hi-hat. So this is our walking foot pattern again. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. So we want to place our 16th note 5-stroke rolls over top of this walking rhythm. We're going to keep it all on the snare here. that one works quite well with the walking foot pattern because you have the right hand first double stroke matching up with the right foot. Right, right, left, left, right. And then you have left, left, right, right, left. So each start and finish of the 5-stroke roll on your hands has a foot going with it. So let's take a look at how we can move 5-stroke rolls around the drum set. You can do this a couple of ways because the full 5-stroke roll rudiment is right, right, left, left, right, left, left, right, right, left. It switches hands. So you could do it that way first. So you could go full 5-stroke roll on each drum. There you're playing both halves on each drum. Let's add the bass drum, and I'll add the hi-hat foot too, just to play those ones around the kit. You don't have to play the hi-hat foot right away, but as you get comfortable with it, you can have that walking rhythm as you practice all these over top. But take it at your own pace. You can add what foot pattern you want or what you're comfortable with. You don't have to jump in with both right away. So let's play, I'm going to play the walking pattern, and I'm going to do a full 5-stroke roll on each drum. Now I only have the 2 toms, so that's why it's a little bit different than what you would play if you had all 3 toms. So that's one way you can move those 5-stroke rolls around the drums. Play the full thing on each drum. But we can split those 5-stroke rolls in half. You can play half on the snare, second half on the first tom. And then here I've got my final tom, which I can play the full 5-stroke roll on because I don't have another drum to use, so I can just go right, right, left, left, right, right, left, left. And that finishes off 2 full 5-stroke rolls, but I broke up the first one between these 2 drums. So let's try that with the feet. So there it is that way broken up. Now we can get even more small in the way we break it up. We've got 5 strokes per half. We've got right, right, left, left, right. And then we've got left, left, right, right, left. So we can play those around the drums like this. Right, right, left, left, right. Left, left, right, right, left. Keeping with this idea that our right hand goes over here and our left hand goes up here, because that's efficient movement. It doesn't, like, you don't want to cross your left hand over there until you're very, very comfortable with those movements. That's pretty awkward at first. So we'll keep it on the comfortable side, and let's play 5-stroke rolls that go down the toms and then up the toms. 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's another version of it. You can also play it between 2 drums. So you get all these different types of sounds when you start to move it around like that. So that's the 5-stroke roll. And like I said, the greatest thing about playing the drums is that once you learn the mechanics of a pattern in your hand, like the 5-stroke roll. Once you've played that enough just on the snare drum and you feel pretty comfortable with, then you can just go and have fun. You can say, well, what does it sound like if I put these two drums? What does it sound like if I play 2 strokes here, 2 strokes here, and 1 stroke there? What if I use the cymbal? And you can start to make up your own combinations of those things and see what feels good to you and what sounds cool. Some things might not work, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of how you experiment and you figure things out, and you sort of build a connection to this drum set. That's where the real fun starts, when you discover the things that you like and what work for you, and create the sounds that you like. So that's the 5-stroke roll. It's a great rudiment. And we're going to jump ahead now to the essential groove. Okay, I'll be right back in a sec here. All right, so we're talking about an essential groove, which is a little bit tricky this week because we're moving into a slightly more complex concept of how we put our beats together. Up until now, we've been working with quarter notes and eighth notes. So we've been playing simple grooves like this. 1, 3, 4, 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4, 1. We've been playing those kind of grooves, which is great, and there's a lot of value to those grooves. They're very fundamental, and you have to have the ability to play those types of grooves automatically, as you should with everything in this course. The more you practice it, the more you learn, you expand, it becomes automatic. This week, we're talking about injecting 16th notes here on the bass drum. So now we have to look closely at this, and again, let's analyze it so that you can understand what is happening here. Take a look at the individual elements again. Hi-hat cymbal on the top. It's important that you can take a little bit of time to look at these things so that you don't kind of get intimidated or sort of overwhelmed as soon as you see it and you think, I don't know what that is, it looks weird. It does look weird, you know, at first, but if, like I said, try to just focus in on one element at a time and say, okay, what are the X's doing? That's my hi-hat, and we have 2 eighth notes, 2 eighth notes, 2 eighth notes, and 2 eighth notes. So you can look down the page and see that that's the same every time. Yep. So your hi-hat is playing consistently eighth notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. That's what it's doing all the time. Okay, so once you've got that, you can say, okay, what other elements are here? The snare, that's on this space. There it is right there, and that's on beat 2. 1 and 2. There's the snare and hi-hat together. 3 and 4. There's the snare and hi-hat together on beat 4. So just like all the other grooves we've played up until now, the snare is always on 2 and 4. There it is again here, 2 and 4. 2, 4, 2, 4. So every groove here is the same. The snare and the hi-hat are consistently playing the same thing. So I'm going to break that down. I'm going to play that now, just the hi-hat and snare. So you know what it sounds like. This is what every groove of these 4 on this page is doing. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 4. That's it. That's what's happening on the hi-hat and snare in each of these 4 variations. So that allows you to kind of relax a little bit and say, okay, well, I can play that. The interest and the challenge of these grooves comes in when we play these bass drum patterns. That's where it gets tricky. So what we notice right away is that we've got 16th notes, okay? These beats with the 2 connecting bars, those are 16th notes. And remember from previous weeks, how do we count our 16th notes? We use those 4 syllables. The first beat is always the number. 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. So we have 1 E, and this is an 8th note rest. So in case you look at this and you think, oh, that's confusing, what is that? What am I supposed to do there? That's an 8th note rest, and it just means that you don't play anything there on the bass drum. That's on the bass drum space. It means you play these 2 bass drums, and then your bass drum does not play until it comes back to here. And that rest is all along here. So that's what that means. So in analyzing this, we can see that we've got the bass drum and the hi-hat together on beat 1. We've got the bass drum here on the 2nd 16th note. So we know when we count 16th notes, we go 1 E and a. So we've got 1 E. This is the E, the 2nd 16th note. This is the and. There's nothing there. So 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4. So this beat's going to sound like this. I'm going to play it nice and slow so we can count those 16th notes clearly. 1 E and 2 E and 1 and 2 and 3 E and 4 and 1 E and 2 and 3 E and 4. So that's how that beat sounds. You're playing these 2 bass drums at twice the speed of your regular 8th note pulse that you're playing on the hi-hat. 1 and 2 and boom, boom. 1 E, 1 E and. So 1 E and. The trick about this that is difficult at first is that the body's natural inclination or instinct is to play the right hand hi-hat at the same time as this bass drum. Here you've got the bass and hi-hat together, and that's very natural. Boom. Here your hand is going to want to play at the same time as that one. It's a innate reaction, and the only thing that you can do to stop that hand from jumping in there and playing is to just have patience and repeat this groove and train that hand to separate from the right leg. Okay, so and the only thing that works is just repetition and playing it over and over until your muscle memory starts to kick in and you develop that separation between the leg and the hand. Because what I'm talking about is that you'll probably feel like doing this. Because that hand and foot are so locked in together on the right side of your body. So if you have trouble with that, it's a similar concept that we did in the previous quarter note grooves section, where you had to play the 8th note bass drum by itself without the hi-hat. This is the same thing, but just at a different speed. So you can take a look at this individual block here that I'm circling, and you can just try to play that a couple of times. 1 E and. So all you're practicing there is 1 E and. You're just training yourself to be able to play that second bass drum right in the middle of those 2 hi-hats without this hand jumping in there. 1 E and 2 and 3 and 4. And that's how that groove should sound. So again, that's the key. Take it slow and steady, and if you're hung up and stuck on these guys, break it down to just this individual little block here and get that guy comfortable being there without a hi-hat. Okay, second variation. Here we are. We know that the hi-hat and the snare are exactly the same because every beat in this week are consistent. The hi-hat and the snare are doing the same thing. Bass drum is changing. So when you see a formulation like this, you might be saying, what does that mean? That looks weird. And yes, it does. But we can analyze it and make sense of it quite easily if we just take a look beat by beat. So remember what it means when you see the single connecting bar. That means that that's an eighth note. Now that's 1/8 note there. And it's connected to this guy. And then we have the 2 bars here. So these 2 beats are both 16th notes. This is an individual 8th note. So the spacing of these is also really good to pay attention to, because you can see very clearly what lines up with the hi-hat. So that can kind of help you to figure out where things are going if you're confused. Take a look at the bass drum. Look straight up from it here as I'm pointing up. Hi-hat and bass together on beat 1. That's an 8th note, so you know that the next note is going to be and. 1 and. Here's the and on the hi-hat and on the bass drum. 1 and ah. Now there's the other 16th note. 1 and 2. That's the ah. And that's the note that comes right here in the middle. There's no hi-hat there. So, just like this, boom, boom, we have boom, boom. 1 bass drum together with a hi-hat here, 1 bass drum together with a hi-hat here, followed by a bass drum by itself. The difference here with this one is that we've got, after this bass drum, we immediately have the snare. In this one, we had the bass drum followed by just a hi-hat. So this one's a bit different. We got the and da and 2, doom doom da. So let's play that. I'll play this for you nice and slow so you can hear how this sounds. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4. 1 and 2, and 3, and 4. So that's that groove. Boom, 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 bop. Boom, 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 bop. And like I said before, if you're getting stuck here, just practice this little section. These 3 hits. Because this is the bit that might cause you some awkwardness, is this stroke here. So you can just isolate these 3 hits. And you would count that and 2 and 2. So you could practice that over and over again to unlock that bass drum foot from your right hand. So you would go and 2 and 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 2. So I'm counting the 1 here, but I'm just hitting these 3 strokes to really program that second bass drum to be able to be on its own. 1 and 2, just like that. And if you do that for a few minutes solid, you'll feel your body start to respond. It'll start to get easier and it'll unlock. Okay, second variation. Here's the third variation. Again, we know hi-hat and snare, no problem. They're just playing the same thing each time. Here's another different looking pattern. Look at that. You think, what on earth does that mean? Well, we know that's the bass drum because it's on the bottom space. We know this bass drum stroke lines up with the hi-hat on beat 1. So that's 1. This is a 16th note. You see how it's got the second little line there, but that line doesn't go all across to this one. It just stays there. So that's telling you that this is only 1 16th note. So this has the value of a 16th note. This is an 8th note. See how it only has the 1 connecting bar. So this guy has the value of 2 16th notes within him because he's a full eighth note, okay? So what that means, if we were to assign names to these guys, this is 1E. This is the E because this is the second 16th note space, 1E. That's why we just have this single, this one double line here that doesn't go all the way across. 1E. Now we know that this guy is the eighth note. So the E, he starts on the E, and here's the and, which is on the hi-hat. Your regular eighth note is being played on the hi-hats. 1 and. Look down from the and there's nothing there. So there's no bass drum being played there. That's because the and is inside of this eighth note here, because this eighth note has two 16th note value. So 1 E and ah. This is a 16th note again. There's the two connecting bars, but the top one does not go to there. It's just there to say this is one last 16th note, and it's the one that's between the hi-hats here. So we know that that's the ah. 1 E and ah. Boom, boom, boom. So the E and the and are held up in this eighth note. The 1 is here, and the ah is here. 1 E and ah. So how does that sound? It sounds like this. If you count it nice and slow, 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1 E and 2 and 3 and 4. Boom, 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 bop. Boom, 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 bop. So you've got your first two 16th notes here, doom, doom. And then your last 16th note here right before the snare. And this hi-hat is coming in right in the middle of these two basses. So you've got all four of your 16th notes are having something played on them here. Boom, boom, tss, boom, right? Boom, boom, tss, boom. 1 E and ah. All four of them are there. 1 E and ah. So that's a good way to practice that too, is to just take this little block and play those 4 16th notes. No snare, because the snare doesn't show up until beat number 2 right here. So you're just focusing on this little block here, the first 4 16th notes. And what you find from doing that is that you have bass and hi-hat together, bass by itself, hi-hat by itself, bass by itself. So boom, boom, boom. That's an important thing to practice like closely and really focus on, because it's kind of tough to be accurate with those different limbs playing one after the other. You play the first hit together with the hi-hat and bass, and then you've got that, which is a little bit tricky. Boom, bop, boom. Boom, bop, boom. So spend some time just breaking that little block down. Once you feel like you've got that, you can add in the snare and complete the beat. 1 E and a 2 and 3 E and a 4 and. That's the third variation. Final variation on this page. And here we have it. So take a look at this one. What have we got here? This, again, everything looks a little bit strange. Now we've got a bass drum on beat 1 together with the hi-hat, but it's got a dot next to it. So this is something that we need to talk about, just to be clear about how that works. The dot indicates the value of half of the original type of note that this is. This is an eighth note here. You can see that because it's got the black dot and the single connecting bar. So this is an eighth note. The dot means that you add half of the value of that eighth note to itself again. So a good way of illustrating what that is like this. We'll draw an eighth note. And we know that an eighth note equals 2 16th notes. So we have this as a general rule of how we count rhythm. 1/8 note equals 2 16th notes. So if we know that the eighth note equals 2 16th notes, then we're going to add half of that back onto that eighth note. What's half of 2? Half of 2 is 1. So that means that now we have 3 16th notes. So that's the formula when you see a dot. The regular eighth note has 2 16th notes in it. The dot on the eighth note means that it has 3 16th notes in there. And that's why we only have this beat and this one. This is a single 16th note. We can see that because of the 2 connecting bars here at the end. And we can look up from it and see that there's nothing there. There's no hi-hat above it. So we know that it's in between the 2 hi-hats, which means that it is the ah. 1 E and ah 2. The last 16th note right before we hit the snare here on 2. So when we're counting that, all the first 3 16th notes are hidden inside of this dotted eighth note. We know that because there's the dot. 1 E and ah. So you're only playing the 1, and the other 2 16th note value are hidden in here. 1 E and ah 2. 3 E and ah 4. So let's see how that sounds. We're playing the first 16th note of the beat and the last 16th note of the beat. Okay, so 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 and 3 E and a 4 and 1 E and a 2 and 3 E and a 4 and so that's how that groove sounds, and that's a pretty cool groove. So if we look at it again close and kind of analyze some things here, when we think about the trickiness of this beat, this is the tricky part. This bit I'm circling, hi-hat to bass drum to snare and hi-hat. What's tricky about it is that you've got to play this hi-hat by itself, and then this bass drum by itself, and then these two together. And you want to be accurate about where you place that bass drum in there. You can see it as almost like a map. You're hearing your hi-hat. Your right hand is playing all these strokes. You go from hi-hat down to bass and then back up. That's how I think of that. I'm coming from up on the hi-hat, down to the bass, and back up again. Just like that. So it's good to get sometimes these visual representations or pattern representations in your mind that can help you to make sense of what that's supposed to be when you're learning it. So for this little section here, hi-hat down to bass and back up to hi-hat with snare. So how do we call those beats? This is the and of beat 1, and a 2, and a 2, and a 2, 1, and a 2, 1, and a 2, 1, So you can think of that little section as just, that's what you want to get comfortable with. Hand, foot. Nice and quick like that. 16th note space is pretty quick. This is an 8th note, and this is the very next 16th note. So there's a 16th note space in between them. Doom. That's quick. And and a two, and a two. So there's 4 variations. Now, the more comfortable you get with this type of idea, when you're playing the drums, you can start to create your own versions of this too. In between every 8th note, there's an upbeat or alternate 16th note. So if we're playing these hi-hat strokes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, there's a 16th note in between each of those. 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. So you can try to put something in there. What would it feel like to put a bass drum stroke in there, a snare in there? Experiment with that. That's the space is there. You know how these 16th notes work, so you can try things out. This has introduced you to some of the patterns of 16th note bass drums that you can put in there, in those spaces. Next week, I think we're going to start looking at snare variations for 16th notes too. So we'll start to fill out those spaces between the hi-hats, and then your grooves really come to life with some cool stuff when that happens. So that's week 5. I'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.